So we're really going to focus on weather condition and fuel conditions that are currently ongoing, and then we'll have a quick outlook portion at the end that shows what we're expecting for the next couple of months. But really it's focused on weather and fuels because we're seeing some very unusual conditions for the time of year. So first, just start showing our quick capture of temperature and precipitation over the last 30 days. You can see warm temperatures, which is indicated by the yellows and the oranges, across almost all of Nevada. Over the last 30 days, we did have maybe some cooler conditions where they were near normal in the east, but generally warm temperatures and very dry conditions. The precipitation is the image on the right. Obviously the bright reds, if you look at the scale at the bottom, some areas have not seen any precipitation in the last month or longer, and the areas that have seen some have been very spotty with thunderstorm activity, so not widespread moisture by any means. Looking at the precipitation since early May, so this is the last 3 months of precipitation for Nevada, and you can see most of the state has received little, if any, precipitation, or certainly well below normal for the last 3 months. The area up in northern Nevada, this precipitation was definitely earlier in the 3-month period during the time when we were still seeing strong cold fronts, bringing windy conditions and precipitation to the region. But for the last 1 to 2 months, it's been very dry across Nevada, and that will really lead us into where our fuel conditions are. So this map shows our precipitation since last October, and this is important because we did have very wet conditions in parts of the winter and spring over southern Nevada, which did bring us a new crop of fine fuels over those areas. So that did push our fine fuel loading to certainly higher than it was last year down in southern Nevada, and then we do have a lot of carryover in areas further north, meaning we have fine fuels that were growing before last fire season in 2019. They were not compacted by snow, and they're still remaining on the ground for this fire season. So we kind of have a mixed bag of new growth and carryover fuels from last year that are contributing to our low elevation fire behavior. So this is the precipitation that was leading into last fire season of 2019. And again, anywhere you see above normal precipitation is where we had our fine fuel growth going into last fire season. And most of that was carried over into this year, especially over the eastern and southern half of the state. This is just a quick look at our soil moisture. We have fuel moisture, we also have soil moisture, and the soil moisture is really the last to dry out across the Great Basin. Our fuels tend to dry out first, and then our soil moisture tends to decrease. And it's definitely below normal, especially over the northern 2/3 of the region. But even in the south, it's even closer to normal, which for this time of year is very dry. So this is a little look at how those weather conditions have been affecting our drought conditions. This evaporative demand drought index is more of a short changing drought index. So it takes into account whether that's really been occurring over the last month or last few weeks. So you can see over the southern part of the state, just with the very dry weather in place. And if you're familiar with weather in southern Nevada or southern areas of the Great Basin, this time of year, typically we would have had monsoon moisture that moves up, and we get a lot of showers and thunderstorms in the south that starts in July and usually continues on into early August. We did not see that this year at all. We had a couple pulses of moisture, but really almost no monsoon moisture to speak of. So that's really why conditions are quite a bit drier now than they should be this time of year, especially over southern and eastern Nevada. This is a look at our longer term drought. So again, this takes into account what we've been seeing for the last several months. We do have some drought conditions really in all areas of the state. The most critical are over central and eastern Nevada, where our drought is in the D2 to D3, or the severe to exceptional drought category. So obviously very dry across the state, and that's just due to the prolonged period of dry weather we've seen. And then just quickly on the right is just the drought outlook, and we're just looking at no change expected in the near future. So now we're going to start diving into our fuel moistures, which are most critical in determining our fire behavior and fire danger conditions across the state. So this is our live fuel moistures, and you can see from the graph, if you're not familiar with looking at live fuel moisture, the green line is what we would normally see. And this period of record goes back to about the mid-80s for most of these charts. So we're talking over 30 years of data. So the green is what we would normally see. The red are our historic lows. That's the lowest the fuel moisture has ever been during that 30-year period. And then the blue line is what we're seeing this year. And you can see for western, north central, eastern Nevada, all similar conditions, below normal fuel moisture, and especially over eastern Nevada, hitting or right near record lows for the time of year. So very critical with live fuels. And live fuels is really what drives most of our fire behavior, because once the live fuels dry out, that means all fuels are available for consumption. And our fire behavior really gets to be in the extreme category when these live fuels get certainly below 100, but many of these live fuels, if you're looking at the charts, are below 70, below 60. So that's really, really extreme fire behavior if we were to get fires in those areas. So that's one of the main contributors we look at for fire behavior. Looking at some of our dead fuel moistures, this is ERC, which is energy release component. And this is just a really, in layman's terms, just a really good look at the combination of live fuel and dead fuel. As live fuels cure, which means they become more dry, and dead fuels, fuel moisture gets lower, this ERC value goes up. So this is a good indicator of the entire state of our fuels. And you can see all areas either near or at records, and even in southern and eastern Nevada, we're so far above records for the time of year, it's not even worth measuring. I mean, it's off the charts just because we have not seen that monsoon moisture that we would typically see in some fashion by this time. And then a quick look at some of our dead fuels. This is our 10-hour fuel moisture, which is more significant of our fine fuels, so our grasses. You can see everything's critically dry in the lowest two categories across the state. And then 100-hour fuel moistures are more representative of our sagebrush. So again, critically dry everywhere. And then our 1,000-hour fuel moistures, we've seen very dry conditions due to a lower snowpack year and the dry conditions we've seen. So our timber areas, our pinyon juniper, also at significantly low levels for the time of year, and has been a problem this year with fire activity. So now a quick look at our outlook. Temperature for the next, this is just for the mid to late portion of August. Kind of warm temperatures in the south, maybe near normal in the north, and then really this dry signature in place. We'll likely see some thunderstorm activity off and on, maybe some wind, but not significant precipitation expected anytime in the next few weeks. And then just, this is just for the month of August as a whole. So again, warm, dry conditions. And then going a little bit further out into September, October, just not a lot of moisture becoming prevalent across our area. The only area that might start to get into some moisture, especially as we get towards the fall months, might be the northern half of the state at this time. But that's pretty far out and definitely difficult to forecast going past the next month or so. So this is a real quick look at the outlook we have as a nation. So obviously Nevada is completely covered in red, looking at above normal fire potential throughout August, and then pushing over the northern half of the area in September. And depending on what September looks like, we could see that above normal potential maybe even remain a little bit further south. Just with these very dry conditions, when we have the grass growth, we get a lot more human activity as well as lightning being a problem. So if we do get starts in areas that there's grasses, when we start to get into the windy period towards fall cold fronts, that's when September can be especially busy. So we kind of have a lot going on. All our fuels are critically dry at all elevations, and that's just definitely been a problem this year. So that's all I've got, unless you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Gina. Since I am recording my screen, I have a counterpart helping with questions. So do we want to take questions? Anthony, do you have anyone?
I don't see anything in the question box.
I'll give it a second if anyone else has anything right now. We can always follow up with stuff after with Darren. Okay. Well,
I just stopped sharing my screen, so you should have control again.
Okay, thanks. I love it. Anyway, all right. Well, we are going to, let's check Jen Diamond. Do you want to say hi and see if we can hear you?
Yeah. Hi, guys. Can everybody hear me?
Loud and clear, babe.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to be speaking to the current restrictions. So in response to the severe risk of wildfire based on those conditions that Gina just explained, the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest, the Bureau of Land Management in Nevada, and the Nevada Division of Forestry are all increasing their fire restrictions beginning tonight at midnight. So due to those critical fuel conditions that Gina was explaining, there is a high likelihood of fire exhibiting extreme fire behavior and posing containment issues for for firefighters. So it is necessary that everybody does their part to prevent human-caused fires, and that homeowners do what they can do to prepare their homes for wildfire. So this year, Nevada has been experiencing an increase in the use of public lands, which has also increased the amount of human-caused fires that we're seeing across the state of Nevada. So referencing the Geographical Area Coordination Center's page, it shows that we've had 373 fires to date. And it's only August. As Gina was saying, it's going to get dry. It's going to continue to get drier. We haven't got those monsoonal moistures. So it's only August, and we have seen 373 fires for the state of Nevada this year. In comparison to last year, where we had 320 fires for the entire year. So we've already exceeded that, and it's, again, only August. And then also in 2018, we had a total of 361 fires for the year. So this new restriction will prohibit open flame campfires on state and federal lands, including areas like campgrounds, picnic areas, day use areas. So no more campfires in those areas. That's how we've upped the restrictions from our current ones. So building, maintaining, attending any type of campfire, charcoal, barbecue, any type of wood fire is not allowed, except for the use of a propane stove that has an on and off switch, or pressurized liquid fuel. Another part of our restriction is smoking in an area devoid of vegetation. So that is not allowed. No welding, no explosives. That's always illegal on public lands. No ammunition with the use of tracer rounds, and no fireworks or exploding targets either. That's always illegal on public lands. And operating a vehicle or other motorized equipment over the top of dried grass is also not allowed due to those that hot exhaust that can cause a fire, or particles shooting out from exhaust. So all of these fire restrictions will be listed on the nevadafireinfo.org page. All of the agencies will have each of their orders posted there, so you can view the specifics on nevadafireinfo.org. And yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody to recreate responsibly and obey the fire restrictions. That's all I got, Rita.
Thanks, Jen. That was good. All right, do we have anyone with questions for Jen?
Really quick, when you guys introduce yourself by name, can you also introduce yourself by agency for those of us from the media who can't maybe see your shirt or logo or who haven't met you yet?
Of course. Jen Diamond is our Forest Service, Bolton National Forest Fire Prevention Officer.
Yep, that's correct. Fire Prevention Officer with the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest.
Rita, this is Whitney. There's another question in the box. Can you go over the campfire restrictions one more time? Is the question.
Sure. So those restrictions are building, maintaining, using a campfire in a developed area or picnic area is no longer allowed. So no charcoal, no barbecue allowed in any federal or state land. The use of a propane stove, jellied petroleum, or pressurized liquid fuel is allowed, as long as it has an on and off switch. That's kind of how I like to relay that, so you can turn that flame off. No smoking in an area that has vegetation. No welding or open torch flame. No using an explosive or tracer round, exploding target, firework allowed on public lands. And then parking or driving over dry grass. So no driving on an area that has vegetation. Stay on dirt roads. And to view all of the specifics, because there might be some specifics for each agency, please visit the nevadaFireInfo.org page, where you can view each agency's restrictions specifically to read each order for the lands that visitors will be recreating on.
Thanks, Jen. And just to highlight that, NevadaFireInfo.org is like it's basically a clearinghouse with resources and links that we put together for all the agencies, and we hope you guys can check that out. It's got some really good resources. So thanks, Jen. Anyone else? I'm thinking, okay, all right, well, we'll shoot over to Clint. Clint, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right. My name is Clinton Mothershed. I work for the Bureau of Land Management. I'm detailed currently into the state lead position of fire mitigation, education, and trespass. I'm doing the same duties in Elko District right now. Thank you all for getting on. And we just realized why we had to go in these restrictions is basically because we're getting on the crux of hunting season. We're going to start seeing that even more people recreating on public and state lands. And we really had to think about this and collaborate and talk about how we were going to mitigate any more fires since we're on track for record human-caused fire season. That being said, Jen did go over the fire restrictions, and I'm just going to discuss a little bit about each one of those items and things we can do to mitigate starting those fires. Jen did a pretty good job on discussing the campfire issue. Really what that boils down to is we have a lot of dispersed sites throughout the state. We do have established sites as well. Some of them are fee paying, but in rural Nevada, there are a lot of dispersed sites, which are just sites off to the side of the road with possibly a rock ring, fire pit. And during hunting season, those sites get used a lot. And we needed to mitigate the potential of starting a lot of fire based off our fuels conditions and expected weather for the foreseeable future. So the decision was basically to eliminate any open flame. And like Jen said, anything with an on-off switch or on-off functionality will still be allowed. Even with some of those devices, we still ask people that they have water, shovel, and any other tools that could possibly help you put out a fire. Handy, even a fire extinguisher would be good. Anywhere within the vicinity of your camp or wherever you're going to have that device. We definitely do want people to enjoy the public lands. We're not trying to prohibit them from having fun, but we have to do what's best as stewards of the public's lands and curtailing unnecessary resource damage, which is not only grazing lands for some families, but it's also wildlife habitat. Some of the habitat that's burned this year has been critical wildlife habitat, winter habitat, which is, it stresses out the herds, and then we just want to do the best thing we can. And also with hunting season, we get those fires in those dispersed sites. We also start seeing more storm systems come off the Pacific coast and the leading edge of some of those pressure systems. You'll have increased winds, and our fear is that the ember from a campfire could blow into some of this already really stressed dry vegetation, and our firefighting resources are already stretched pretty thin, and we just want to mitigate anything and possibly we can. The next thing that was discussed was smoking, and only in a enclosed vehicle. That's pretty self-explanatory. We do have a lot of these types of fires that occur along Interstate 80. The conditions have to be right, and this year for a lot of these human-caused fires that we were trying to curtail, the conditions are right, and this is definitely one of them. All it takes is an unlit or an unextinguished cigarette, a slight wind, and some temperatures in the 90 degrees or above and low RHs, and you can get a smoldering fire, which will eventually turn into a wildfire. With dewelding or operating an acetylene torch with open flames, except by permit, we do realize that vehicles break down, and in the ranching communities, equipment breaks down, and we ask that you just try to fix your equipment or repair it in an area devoid of vegetation if at all possible. And by doing that, you're really going to help us mitigate that issue. And it does happen a lot in the fields and stuff in rural Nevada on the ranches. We just ask you have a hose, a charged hose with water, a shovel, a fire extinguisher, and using or causing to be used any explosive set by permit. That's also pretty self-explanatory. Explosives are illegal on all public lands in Nevada, and they will and can, and it's been proven they will start fires. And then we have discharge, the use or allowing use of fireworks, tracer rounds, explosive targets, or any other incendiary device. This is one of our primary human-caused fire problems throughout the state of Nevada. It's the shooting fires, and we just ask people to go to established sites. A rule of thumb that's really good, that's been proven through peer-reviewed studies, is that a lot of the shooting-related fires, they start when the fuels are like we are experiencing now. The weather is, the RH will be below 10%. The temperatures will be in the high to mid 90s, and you have a slight little wind. And some of the bullets will fragment when they strike a hard metal object or a rock, and it will start a wildfire. And then the final one is just operating or parking a vehicle or other motorized equipment over on top of dried cured vegetation. We've experienced this quite a bit. Last year, several fires that were preventable within the state were caused by this, people out hunting or recreating. They had some debris build up underneath their vehicle on the exhaust, and just given the conditions and the weather, they eventually started either wildland fires or the vehicle on fire, which then extended to wildland fires. So we ask folks to, when you're done driving and recreating on public lands, the simplest thing to do is just go through a drive-through car wash or to a car wash and make sure you don't neglect the underside of your undercarriage of your vehicle. Your exhaust can get extremely hot, and that can also set off human-caused fires in these conditions. We just ask folks that if your vehicle's not running good, please get it looked at. A lot of fires, we find pieces of catalytic converter along within the origin area of the fires, and that's primarily the cause. The other issue we've had throughout the state are roadside fires in general, and a lot of it has to do with maintenance on vehicles and or their tires. So please, if you're going to be towing a trailer to go recreate, check your tires, check them twice. When you stop to get fuel, please check them again. Those tires can get hot enough to start wildland fires. In a nutshell, that's what we have. And as it's already been stressed, Nevada Fire Info has a lot of great information. One thing we haven't discussed too much yet is defensible space around homes. I know that's not the purpose of this call, but you can go to livingwithfire.com, and it has a lot of great information, as well as nevadafireinfo.org. You can find a lot of great information on how to make your home fire safe and how to protect your best interests and your livelihood and your family. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Clint. That's Clint Mothershed from the BLM Nevada. He's the Fire Mitigation and Education Specialist, and he's the acting state office for Nevada Fire Mitigation and Trespass lead. Do we have any questions for Clint? I know we have some in the chat box. Some of those we're going to wait until after Ron Bollier goes, and we can read those out loud. Oh, very thorough. Thank you, Clint. Okay, Ron, are you ready? I think you're up. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick as well?
Yeah. Thank you. Ron Boyer, I'm the State Fire Management Officer for the state of Nevada, Nevada Division of Forestry. We're here to talk about fire restrictions. The state of Nevada, with the state parks and state lands, are in alignment with the federal fire restrictions, the Forest Service BLM. We have a partnership together. Our restrictions are identical to the federal restrictions in all state parks. And I would just like to talk a little bit about where we're at with fire season and our severity of fuels, as Gina, our meteorologist, referred to. A lot of our fires in the state this year have been human caused. And I just want to reemphasize while you're to the citizens in Nevada, while you're out recreating, like Clint and Jen Diamond had said, Clint Mothershed, please be careful out there on public and county protected lands that you may have access to, private lands that may appear to be open to the public. Just be aware of where you're at. For the business side of the state of Nevada, just be careful on heavy equipment transportation on the roadways. We've been seeing an increase in roadside fires caused from chains dragging, from malfunctioning equipment, and those sorts of nature. So please do good walkarounds and make sure your equipment is good for the public recreating. Make sure all your chains are tied up on your RVs and they're not dragging. That's a primary cause of roadside wildland fires. I'd also like to just kind of close out on a little bit on where we're at with our protection of our wildland fire response personnel in our pandemic. We have strived really hard to protect our wildland firefighting resources. COVID-19 is becoming in the arena of our wildland firefighting response personnel. And what that means just overall is if you have a crew of 20 out there or 5 out there, one of them becomes positive, it takes that whole crew out of service for approximately 3 to 4 weeks. And it is a nationwide and it is affecting the wildland firefighting community. So the more we can protect our firefighters and be better citizens out there and reduce the human-caused fires, will lessen our wildland fire response personnel having to come together in tight quarters. With that, I'll just close out and say, let's do the best we can there, support our partners all the way around in the state, and we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions for Ron? I think, Jen, I know you've been doing some answering in the chat box. Would you mind maybe reading off the questions and then answering with your responses? And then we'll have that for the recording, and then good of you on here as well.
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see here. One of the questions here was, are there any fines for violating these restrictions, and are they higher than previous years? So I put down there in the chat box, and I'm just going to read my reply there. It's members of the public are cautioned that failure to comply with these restrictions may result in criminal or civil penalties. An individual can be fined up to $5,000 or 6 months in jail for an illegal campfire. But in addition to that, anyone found responsible for starting a wildfire can be held civilly and criminally and liable for those costs and suppression costs. And then the next question I see here is, can we break down the number of human-caused fires versus natural fires so far this year? So again, I'm referencing the Great Basin Coordination Center page on that, and that says, like I said earlier, we had 373 total human-caused fires, and we've had 117 lightning-caused fires this year. So that's for the state of Nevada. And so those numbers, as you can see, the human-caused fires are more than double the amount of the lightning-caused fires that we've had this year. The next question I'm seeing in the chat box is from Sherry. Was there a fine imposed for illegal campfires which started the Mahogany Fire? Did you identify the person who initiated that campfire? I'm going to stick to the topic here of our fuel conditions and the fire restrictions that we are going in. I can say that the Mahogany Fire was caused by a campfire, as we have released that information, but I am not going to be able to speak to identifying the person, as that would be a question for the investigators, and I believe that that is still under investigation. I don't see any more questions. Does anybody have any more questions?
I do, actually. Denise Ross with Channel 3 in Las Vegas. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. We can hear you.
We were up at in the Spring Mountains a few weeks ago, like in Kyle Canyon. They already had a lot of the fire rings taped off a few weeks ago. So are these restrictions above and beyond that? Or is this now just maybe an expansion statewide of what we've already seen in Southern Nevada?
I can answer that question, Rita. So in the Spring Mountains National Recreation Area is part of the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest, and we were in stage 2 restrictions down there before this. So this current restriction is now statewide, all public and state lands. So what we have implemented in the Spring Mountains area is now pretty much the same across the state everywhere now.
That's correct. I believe we went into those restrictions in Southern Nevada in June, my understanding, maybe earlier. I think I saw one in the chat box, Jen, from Amy Alonso. That could you clarify in the presentation you said 373 total fires. You just now said those were human caused. So is 373 human caused or total for the year?
Yeah, that's total. I'm sorry, that's 373 human caused fires, 117 lightning caused fires, making for a total of 490.
Hey, so this is Amy from the RGJ. So just to backtrack, when you threw out those other numbers in the presentation that that we were above so far for this year, the 361 in 2018 and 320 for last year, you're talking just specifically human caused.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I think I was on mute there. Those numbers were human caused fires.
Okay, thank you.
I can give you those stats after this I can put it in the chat box. To be clear.
Yeah, I totally just missed you saying human caused, so thank you for clarifying.
Okay, we have one more. Maybe this one can be for Clint since he's been quiet for a few minutes. It says, which of the new restrictions are a notable increase on current fire restrictions? So I think that's the campfire.
Yes, it would be the first one, the first one, the one we're trying to highlight. Previously, campfires were allowed in dispersed sites. I can speak for the BLM anyway. In dispersed sites or established campsites with a minimal clearance of 6 feet around the campfire. And given the current conditions of our fuels, that's just not, that it's just too risky out there to allow any open flame that could produce an ember or a spark to be out there. So it really, the rest of them are the same. It's just the first one that we've had to change and tighten up a bit.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Or Clint, sorry. Ron had to take off to another meeting, so. Okay, I think that's it. Does anyone have anything else? And feel free to follow up. I believe Whitney has her contact information on the flyer, and if there's any specifics to BLM or Forest Service, she knows how to get a hold of all of us. And I just want to say thank you for everyone's attendance. This was really, I think this will be really helpful. Our goal is to communicate as much of this to the public as possible right now. Anything you can do to help us generate information sharing is awesome. BLM Nevada and the Forest Service use Nevada Fire Info Twitter. If you guys aren't following us on that already, we try to keep every single fire update on that all season long. And we also have obviously BLM Nevada Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and then the Forest Service has a Facebook and Twitter as well. So we try to do our very best to keep those updated as the season rolls around. And you know, sometimes we're not even looking at fire season, but a fire year in some cases. So we appreciate everyone's help in getting this information out. And like I said, we will have this recording on YouTube for sure, BLM Nevada, and I could probably share a link to that later so you guys all have that. The other thing I wanted to mention too, I don't know if you'll need any headshots. I think our videos went pretty well for this if you needed people's headshots for the story, but we do have some pretty great B-roll and photography from fires that we've had this season. So if anyone's interested in that, you can email me or Whitney. My name is Rita Henderson, and it's my full name, RITAHENDERSON @BLM.gov. So I can help you out with that anytime. My phone number too, you can text me if you're looking for stuff anytime, 775-461-6753. And I'm BLM Nevada's Public Affairs Specialist and Social Media Lead. So let us know. Looks like Gina and Sherry are working that one out in the chat box. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's time. That was fun, and I hope here's fingers crossed to a good future of no more human caused fires.